I sit in my car with the engine off, watching rain streak down the windshield in uneven paths. The community hall looms before me through the glass, its windows glowing yellow against the October darkness. I can hear them in there. Laughter carries through the night air, voices that once filled the hallways of Jefferson High, now grown older, deeper, changed by 20 years of living lives I know nothing about. The invitation rests in my hands, the paper soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. Class of 2005 reunion. I had thrown it away twice. Clara fished it out of the trash the second time, smoothing it against the kitchen counter with that patient look she gets when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. She said it might be good for me to reconnect with old friends. She used the word reconnect like it was medicine I needed to take. My wedding ring catches the streetlight as I turn the envelope over. The gold band feels heavier tonight, like it's made of something denser than metal. I twist it around my finger the way I always do when I'm nervous, a habit Clara stopped commenting on years ago. The motion is automatic now, meaningless, but tonight it feels deliberate. Tonight it feels like a choice. I slip the ring off and place it in the cup holder between the seats. My finger feels strange without it, lighter, but somehow more vulnerable. I flex my hand, studying the pale band of skin where the ring has lived for 18 years. The mark looks foreign, like evidence of someone else's life. Through the hall windows, I catch glimpses of movement. Bodies in motion, hands gesturing with drinks, heads thrown back in laughter. These are people who knew me when I was 17 and thought I understood what I wanted from life. They knew me when I believed that wanting something and choosing it were the same thing. I tell myself this was a mistake. I should start the car and drive home to Clara, to our quiet house with its carefully arranged furniture and framed photographs of a life that looks exactly like what it's supposed to look like. I should return to my evening routine of checking emails and watching the news while Clara reads her book in the chair beside me, both of us existing in the comfortable silence of people who have said everything they need to say to each other. But I don't start the car. Instead, I open the door and step into the rain. The hall smells like coffee and cheap wine, the same combination that haunted every school event I remember. Someone has strung lights across the ceiling, but they're too bright, casting harsh shadows that make everyone look older than they should. I recognize faces immediately, even changed by time. Sarah Mitchell, now Sarah something else, waves at me from across the room. Tom Bradley, who looks exactly the same except for the gray at his temples, raises his beer in greeting. And then I see him. Elias Monroe stands near the far wall, studying a display of old yearbook photos. He hasn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I can observe him the way I used to in calculus class, when I would pretend to be solving equations while really watching the way he chewed his pen or ran his fingers through his dark hair. The hair is shorter now, touched with silver, and he's wearing a navy sweater that makes his eyes look deeper than I remembered. But it's still him. It's still the face that used to appear in thoughts I trained myself not to think. He turns, as if sensing my stare, and our eyes meet across 20 years in a room full of people who have no idea what this moment costs me. His face changes, surprise giving way to something softer, something that looks like recognition but feels like remembering. He smiles, the same crooked smile that used to make my chest tight in ways I convinced myself meant nothing. He walks toward me, weaving between clusters of our former classmates, and I stand frozen, my hands empty without my wedding ring, my heart doing something it hasn't done in so long I'd forgotten it was capable of it. Julian, he says when he reaches me, and my name in his voice sounds like coming home and running away at the same time. Elias, I manage to say back, and we shake hands like civilized men do, like old friends who are happy to see each other after a long absence. His fingers are warm against mine, and I hold on a moment too long before letting go. We exchange the usual pleasantries. He tells me he teaches art now at the local high school. I tell him about my financial planning practice, about Clara, about our kids in college. We speak in the careful language of people who are pretending this is simple, that seeing each other again is just a pleasant surprise instead of the thing that has made my pulse forget its rhythm. But his eyes say something different. They say he remembers too. They say the 20 years between then and now might as well be 20 minutes, and that some truths don't fade no matter how deeply you bury them. I tell myself it's nothing. I tell myself I'm a married man who came to a reunion to be polite, to make Clara happy, to prove that I can face my past without flinching. But Elias's eyes tell me I'm lying. I drive home through empty streets, my wedding ring back on my finger where it belongs. The reunion is behind me now, filed away like everything else I don't allow myself to examine too closely. Clara is already asleep when I slip into our bedroom, her breathing steady and familiar. I undress quietly in the dark, hanging my jacket in the closet beside her organized rows of blouses and cardigans, everything in its proper place. Our house exists in shades of beige and cream, decorated with the careful neutrality of a model home. Clara chose everything after we moved here 12 years ago, when the kids were still young enough to fill the rooms with noise. She has excellent taste, everyone says so. The furniture is quality, the artwork inoffensive, the throw pillows changed seasonally. It's the kind of home that photographs well for holiday cards, where everything coordinates and nothing demands too much attention. I shower in the guest bathroom so I won't wake her, standing under water that never quite gets hot enough. In the mirror afterward, I study my face for signs of what happened tonight, but I look the same as always. 43 years old, graying at the temples, lines around my eyes that Clara says make me look distinguished. I practice the expression I'll wear tomorrow morning, the same pleasant mask I've perfected over 2 decades of marriage. My days follow patterns I could navigate blindfolded. Coffee black, toast with butter, the morning news playing while Clara moves through her own routine with choreographed precision. She tells me about her book club, her yoga class, her plans to redecorate the guest room now that the kids visit so rarely. I nod and make appropriate sounds while reading emails on my phone, both of us performing our parts in a play we never auditioned for. The office offers its own rituals of normalcy. My desk faces a window that overlooks the parking lot, and I've arranged family photos along its edge like evidence of a life well lived. Clara at our wedding, radiant in white lace. The kids at various ages, gap-toothed grins and graduation caps. Family vacations to places we chose because they seemed like places families should go. Everyone always comments on what a beautiful family I have, and I agree because it's true and because the alternative is unthinkable. I help people plan for futures they can envision clearly, retirement accounts and college funds and life insurance policies that will protect the people they love. I'm good at this work because I understand the value of security, the importance of building something solid and dependable. My clients trust me because I've built exactly the kind of life they're working toward. They see my wedding ring, the photos on my desk, and they know I understand what matters. But lately, the conversations feel hollow. Mrs. Patterson talks about the cruise she and her husband will take when he retires, her eyes bright with anticipation. Young couples show me pictures of houses they want to buy, neighborhoods where they'll raise children and plant gardens and grow old together. I smile and input numbers and calculate compound interest, while something inside me grows quieter with each passing day. Clara and I speak in the shorthand of long marriage, conversations that consist mostly of logistics. The grocery list, the lawn that needs mowing, our son's graduation next month. She's not unkind, never has been. She keeps our life running smoothly, remembers birthdays and makes dentist appointments and ensures we're invited to the right parties. When people ask how we make marriage work after so many years, she says the secret is being best friends first, and I nod because it sounds right, and because neither of us knows what else to say. At night, we lie in bed reading separate books under separate lamps, the space between us measured and familiar. Sometimes her foot brushes mine under the covers, and she'll smile without looking up from her novel. These moments of casual intimacy feel like distant memories, echoes of people we used to be. We haven't made love in months, maybe longer. Neither of us mentions this absence, as if speaking it aloud would make it real in ways we're not prepared to handle. The silence in our house has weight now. It settles in corners and accumulates like dust in places we don't clean often enough. Our children call occasionally, Brief conversations full of updates about classes and jobs and relationships we hear about, but never quite understand. They've built lives we weren't invited into, which feels both natural and impossible to accept. I find myself standing in rooms and forgetting why I came there. I start sentences and lose track of what I meant to say. Clara asks if I'm feeling all right, if maybe I should see someone about the stress, and I tell her I'm fine, just tired. The word tired has become my explanation for everything I can't explain, a catch-all for the growing distance I feel from my own life. Some evenings, I pour myself a scotch and sit in my study, surrounded by financial journals and tax documents and the detritus of a career that has provided well for my family. The scotch is expensive, a gift from Clara last Christmas, but it tastes like obligation. I drink it anyway, watching shadows lengthen across the carpet while Clara watches television in the next room, her laughter drifting through the walls at regular intervals. This is the life I built, choice by careful choice. It's respectable and stable, and exactly what I thought I wanted when I was young enough to believe that wanting and choosing were the same thing. It fits me the way a suit fits, perfectly tailored to hide any imperfections. But some nights, sitting alone with my expensive scotch, I wonder if this is what drowning feels like when it happens slowly, one measured breath at a time. The conversation with Elias at the reunion stretches longer than it should. We find ourselves in a corner of the hall, away from the main crowd, holding plastic cups of wine that taste like chemicals and childhood disappointment. The fluorescent lights have dimmed as the evening wears on, casting everything in a softer glow that makes the years between us feel less substantial. We talk about safe things first. He tells me about his students, how teaching art to teenagers requires equal parts patience and courage. I describe my work in the careful, practiced way I've learned to make financial planning sound meaningful. But underneath these polite exchanges, something else is happening. His laugh is the same as I remember, and when he gestures while talking, his hands move in patterns that unlock memories I thought I'd successfully buried. "Do you remember Peterson's English class?" he says, and suddenly we're 17 again, complaining about homework and dreading pop quizzes. We laugh about teachers who seemed ancient then but were probably younger than we are now. About the cafeteria food that was legendarily terrible, the fire drill that interrupted the chemistry final, the way everyone panicked during senior year when college acceptances started arriving. But even as we reminisce, there's weight in the spaces between words. When he mentions a book we both loved, our eyes meet and hold for too long. When I accidentally brush his hand reaching for my wine, neither of us pulls away immediately. We're having two conversations simultaneously, one with words and one without, and the second one is far more honest than either of us is prepared for. The hall grows quieter around us as classmates drift away, heading home to their own carefully constructed lives. Elias glances at his watch and says he should probably leave soon, but he doesn't move. Neither do I. We've created our own small world in this corner, and neither of us seems willing to be the first to break the spell. "I should go too," I say finally, thinking of Clara asleep in our beige bedroom, of the morning routine waiting for me in a few hours. Elias nods, but then does something unexpected. He asks if I'd like to meet for coffee sometime, just to catch up properly without all this noise and distraction. The question hangs between us, simple on the surface, but loaded with implications I'm not sure I'm ready to examine. I should say no. I should make some excuse about being too busy, about family obligations, about the complexity of maintaining old friendships when life has moved on. But I don't say no. Instead, I hear myself agreeing, telling him I'd like that, watching his face light up in a way that makes my chest tight. We meet at a small coffee shop downtown 3 days later. I arrive first, choosing a table by the window, and spend several minutes rearranging the sugar packets and checking my phone for messages that aren't there. When Elias walks through the door, something settles in me that I hadn't realized was agitated. He looks different in daylight, more real somehow. And when he smiles at me across the shop, I remember why I used to watch him in calculus class, when I should have been paying attention to derivatives. The coffee is better than the wine at the reunion, and our conversation flows with an ease that surprises me. We talk about books we've read recently, movies that moved us, places we've traveled. He tells me about summers he spends painting landscapes in New Mexico, about students whose artwork stops him in his tracks. I find myself describing moments of genuine satisfaction in my work, connections with clients that go beyond numbers and projections. Hours pass without either of us noticing. The coffee shop empties and refills around us, the afternoon light shifting through the windows as we talk. It occurs to me that I haven't had a conversation like this in years, maybe decades. With Clara, we discuss schedules and responsibilities. With colleagues, we keep things professional. With old friends from college, when we occasionally meet, we rehash the same stories about people we used to know. But with Elias, I find myself saying things I hadn't planned to say. I tell him about the silence in my house, about feeling like I'm performing in a play I never auditioned for. He listens without judgment, asking questions that show he's actually hearing me, not just waiting for his turn to speak. When the conversation turns to him, I learn that he never married, never had children. For a while, he dated a woman named Sarah, a fellow teacher who wanted the same suburban stability I've built my life around. But it ended amicably when they both realized they were trying to want something that didn't come naturally to either of them. I almost got married once, he says, stirring his coffee absently. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trying to become someone else, someone who fit better into the life everyone expected me to want. I understand that feeling more than I should, and the recognition must show on my face because he looks at me with something that might be sympathy or might be something else entirely. As the afternoon fades into early evening, Elias grows quieter. He stares out the window for a long moment before speaking again. You know, he says, his voice carefully casual, I had such a crush on you in high school. It feels silly admitting it now, but there it is. He laughs, as if trying to lighten the confession, adding that it was probably just typical teenage confusion, just pretend feelings that didn't mean anything real. But when he looks at me, his eyes aren't laughing. They're asking a question I'm not sure I know how to answer. I drive home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, his words echoing in my head. Only pretend, he said, but everything about the way he looked at me suggested the opposite. The crush he described doesn't feel like ancient history. It feels immediate and present and dangerous in ways that make my heart race even as I tell myself I'm being ridiculous. Clara is waiting when I get home, dinner warming in the oven, and she asks how my coffee with my old friend went. Fine, I tell her, just catching up on old times. But as I wash my hands at the kitchen sink, I catch my reflection in the window above the faucet, and I know that something fundamental has shifted. The man looking back at me is the same man who left the house this morning, but he's carrying something new now, something that feels both like a gift and a burden. That night, lying in bed beside Clara, I stare at the ceiling and think about the word pretend. About the distance between what we want and what we choose, between the lives we build and the lives we dream about in moments when we think no one is watching. About Elias's eyes when he said he'd had a crush on me, and the way my chest tightened when he said it was only pretend. I know I should let this go, file it away with all the other things I don't allow myself to examine too closely. But Elias's confession has opened something in me that I thought I'd sealed shut 20 years ago, and I'm not sure I remember how to close it again. The lies begin small, almost innocent. A client meeting that runs late when I'm actually walking along the river with Elias, talking about everything and nothing while the water moves past us like time we're trying to slow down. An old friend visiting from out of town when we're really having dinner at a quiet restaurant on the edge of downtown. The kind of place where the lighting is dim and the tables are far enough apart for real conversation. I tell Clara these stories with the practiced ease of someone who has been constructing careful truths his entire life. She nods and asks appropriate questions about the fictional client, the imaginary friend, and I answer with details that come to me as easily as breathing. I've always been good at this kind of performance, this careful management of information that keeps everyone comfortable and unaware. But each lie feels heavier than the last, not because of any moral weight, but because of what it represents. Each excuse I make to see Elias is an admission that I want to see him, that these meetings have become something I need rather than something I merely enjoy. The frequency increases gradually, naturally, until I realize I'm finding reasons to be away from home 3 or 4 times a week. Elias and I develop routines without ever discussing them. Tuesday evenings by the river, where we walk the same path while he tells me about his students, and I describe the peculiar intimacy of helping strangers plan for futures they can't fully imagine. Thursday dinners at restaurants we choose almost randomly, places neither of us has been before, where we can sit across from each other and pretend this is normal. Two old friends catching up over pasta and wine that tastes better than anything I've had in years. The conversations are different from anything I remember. We talk about books that changed us, about moments of beauty that stopped us in our tracks, about fears we've never spoken aloud. Elias tells me about dreams he had as a child of becoming a famous artist, showing his work in galleries in New York and Paris. I confess that I sometimes lie awake at night wondering what would have happened if I'd studied literature instead of business, if I'd followed the part of myself that used to write poetry in college notebooks I threw away years ago. There's a moment during our third dinner together when Elias reaches across the table to emphasize a point about one of his students, and his hand brushes mine. Neither of us pulls away immediately. His fingers are warm, slightly rough from years of working with clay and paint, and for several seconds we sit like that, connected by this small touch that feels enormous. When he finally moves his hand, the absence is so acute, it's almost painful. We don't acknowledge these moments directly, but they accumulate like evidence of something neither of us is ready to name. The way our shoulders touch when we walk close together by the water, the silence that hangs after he laughs at something I've said, both of us looking at each other a beat too long. The careful way I avoid his eyes when he's talking, afraid of what he might see in mine. One evening, as we're walking back to our cars after dinner, Elias stops suddenly and turns to me. "Are you happy, Julian?" he asks, and the question is so direct, so unexpected, that I actually step backward as if he struck me. I mean really happy, not just comfortable or satisfied or getting by. Actually happy. I start to give him the answer I've perfected for this question, the one about gratitude for my family and my success, and all the ways my life has exceeded my expectations. But the words stick in my throat. Standing there under a streetlight with Elias looking at me with those patient, knowing eyes, I find I can't lie to him the way I lie to everyone else, including myself. "I don't know," I say finally, and the admission feels like stepping off a cliff. I'm not sure I remember what that feels like. He nods as if this is exactly what he expected me to say, and we walk to our cars in silence that feels full rather than empty, charged with everything we're not saying. The drive home gives me time to reconstruct my defenses, to remind myself of all the reasons why this line of questioning is dangerous and unfair. I have responsibilities, obligations, a life that depends on my continued participation in its carefully orchestrated routines. Happiness is a luxury I traded away years ago for stability, for the security of knowing exactly what each day would bring. But Elias's question follows me into the house, where Clara is reading in her chair under the warm lamplight. Everything exactly as I left it hours ago. She looks up when I enter, smiles, asks how my meeting went. "Fine," I tell her, "just some complex estate planning that required more time than expected." She nods and returns to her book, and I stand in the doorway watching her read, struck suddenly by the realization that I feel like a stranger in my own home. The feeling intensifies over the following weeks. I notice things I've been overlooking for years. The way Clara and I move around each other in the kitchen like dancers who know the choreography but have forgotten the music. How our dinner conversations consist entirely of logistics and observations about other people's lives. The careful distance we maintain even when we're sitting on the same couch, reading separate books under separate lamps. I find myself comparing everything to the ease I feel with Elias. The way time moves differently when we're together, stretching and contracting until hours feel like minutes and minutes feel like small eternities. How silence between us feels comfortable rather than hollow, full of possibility rather than evidence of things we've stopped bothering to say. Clara notices the change before I do. She starts asking if I'm feeling all right, if maybe I'm working too hard, if I should consider taking some time off. Her concern feels genuine but distant, like worry for a friend rather than a husband. When I tell her I'm fine, just tired, she accepts this explanation the way she accepts everything else I tell her, with the trust of someone who has never had a reason to question my version of events. But I can see her watching me sometimes, studying my face as if looking for clues to a puzzle she can't quite identify. The way I check my phone more often, the distracted quality of my responses to her questions, the fact that I've started humming unconsciously old songs from high school that I haven't thought about in decades. One Saturday morning, she finds me staring out the kitchen window instead of reading the financial section like I usually do. "What are you thinking about?" she asks, and I realize I don't have an answer that won't lead to more questions I can't safely navigate. "Just work stuff," I tell her, but the lie feels transparent in a way my other lies haven't. She studies my face for a moment, then nods and returns to her crossword puzzle. But something has shifted between us. A new kind of wariness, as if she senses danger she can't yet identify. The truth is, I'm thinking about Tuesday evening, about walking by the river with Elias while he describes the way light falls through the trees behind the school where he teaches. I'm thinking about the way he listens when I talk, as if every word I say matters, as if I'm someone worth paying attention to. I'm thinking about how alive I feel in those moments, how present in my own life in ways I'd forgotten were possible. With Elias, I remember what it feels like to be curious about the world, to have opinions about things that don't affect my financial portfolio or my family's schedule. I find myself laughing at his stories, making jokes that surprise both of us, talking about ideas instead of just managing practical concerns. It's like waking up after years of sleepwalking, and the contrast makes everything else in my life seem pale and muted by comparison. The beige walls of my house, the predictable rhythms of my marriage, the careful politeness that has replaced whatever passion Clara and I once felt for each other. All of it feels like performance now, like an elaborate costume I put on each morning and can't wait to remove each night. I know this awakening is dangerous. I can feel it changing me in ways I'm not sure I can control or reverse. But for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel like myself again, like the person I was before I learned to want only things that seemed reasonable and safe. In Elias's presence, I am awake. And the more awake I become, the more difficult it is to pretend that sleeping was ever enough. The invitation to Elias's apartment comes casually, almost as an afterthought. We're finishing dinner at our usual restaurant when he mentions that he has a bottle of wine at home, something special a friend brought back from Italy, and would I like to see his art studio while we finish the evening properly. The question feels loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure, but I hear myself accepting before my rational mind can intervene. His apartment is smaller than our house, but it feels infinitely more alive. Canvases lean against walls in various stages of completion, brushes stand in mason jars like small forests, and the air carries the scent of paint and turpentine and something indefinably creative. Books are stacked everywhere, not arranged for display but clearly read and reread, their spines creased with use. "This is where you live," I say, and it comes out sounding more profound than I intended. Elias pours wine into mismatched glasses, laughing as he tells me about finding them at estate sales and thrift shops. Nothing in his space coordinates the way everything does in my house, but somehow it all fits together, reflecting a life lived according to internal logic rather than external expectations. He shows me his recent work, paintings of landscapes and portraits that capture something essential about their subjects that photographs never could. There's one of an elderly woman sitting on a park bench, her hands folded in her lap, and somehow he's managed to paint not just her physical presence, but her entire history, all the joys and sorrows that brought her to that moment. "You see people," I tell him, studying the painting. He looks at me then with an expression I can't quite read. "I try to," he says quietly. "The wine is excellent, smooth and complex in ways that make the expensive bottle Clara gave me for Christmas taste like furniture polish." We sit on his small couch, closer than we've ever sat before, the paintings surrounding us like witnesses to conversations we're finally brave enough to have. He tells me about the loneliness of living authentically in a world that often rewards pretense, about students who struggle with questions they're afraid to ask, about friends who've built lives that look perfect from the outside but feel hollow within, about the courage it takes to keep creating when no one is paying attention, to keep believing in beauty when the world seems designed to erode that faith. I find myself talking about things I've never said aloud. The way I sometimes feel like an actor who's been playing the same role for so long he's forgotten his real name. How success feels empty when it's measured in other people's definitions of achievement. The growing certainty that I've spent 20 years becoming someone I don't recognize or particularly like. The conversation moves in currents and eddies, touching on deep truths before sliding back to safer territory, then diving deep again when neither of us can resist the pull. The wine disappears without either of us noticing, and the apartment grows dim as the evening light fades, but neither of us moves to turn on lamps. There's a moment when Elias is describing a trip he took alone to the coast last summer, painting seascapes in the early morning light, when he stops mid-sentence and looks at me with something like wonder. "What?" I ask. "I just realized how long it's been since I could talk to someone like this," he says. "Really talk, without having to translate everything into language that won't make them uncomfortable." The air between us grows heavy with acknowledgement of what we're not saying directly. All evening, we've been dancing around the edges of a truth that feels too dangerous to name, speaking in metaphors and careful half-revelations that leave everything important implied rather than stated. When I finally stand to leave, it's nearly midnight. Elias walks me to the door, and we pause there in the small entryway, neither of us quite ready to end this evening that has felt different from all the others. More honest, more dangerous, more real. "It's dangerous, you know," he says, his voice soft and careful, pretending like this. The words hang between us, and I know he's not talking about our friendship or these dinners or the lies I've been telling Clara. He's talking about the way we look at each other when we think the other isn't paying attention. The careful distance we maintain and the moments when it collapses without warning. The conversation we've been having all evening without ever directly acknowledging its true subject. I should agree with him, make some joke to defuse the tension, say goodnight, and drive home to my carefully constructed life. Instead, I step closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. When I kiss him, it's not a decision so much as a surrender to gravity that's been pulling at me for weeks. His lips are soft and warm and taste faintly of the Italian wine, and for a moment that feels both eternal and impossibly brief, everything else falls away. There is no Clara sleeping in our beige bedroom, no children who call occasionally, no carefully maintained facade of respectability. There is only this, only him. Only the truth I've been running from for 20 years finally catching up to me. We break apart as if we've touched something that burns, both of us stepping back with wide eyes and trembling hands. The silence that follows feels charged and terrifying and inevitable all at once. "I should go," I say, my voice barely recognizable as my own. Elias nods, but his eyes never leave mine. "Drive safely," he says, and there's so much tenderness in those simple words that they nearly undo me completely. The drive home passes in a haze of shock and something that might be panic or might be relief. My hands shake on the steering wheel, and I have to pull over twice just to remember how to breathe. The taste of him lingers on my lips, evidence of a line I've finally crossed after circling it for what feels like my entire adult life. Clara is asleep when I slip into the house, but I'm too wired to even consider joining her. Instead, I stand in our pristine bathroom, staring at my reflection while I brush my teeth with mechanical precision. The man in the mirror looks the same as always, but something fundamental has shifted behind his eyes. I finally admit to myself what I've always known, but never allowed myself to acknowledge. I have never stopped wanting Elias Monroe. Not in high school when I convinced myself it was just confusion, not in college when I threw myself into dating women, not when I married Clara, or when our children were born, or during any of the thousands of days I've spent building a life designed to prove that want was just a phase I'd grown out of. The realization should terrify me. And it does, in ways that make my chest tight and my breathing shallow. But underneath the terror is something else, something that feels like relief so profound it's almost religious. The weight of carrying this secret, of pretending not to know myself, has been crushing me so gradually I didn't notice until it was suddenly gone. I lie in bed beside Clara, listening to her steady breathing, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Her presence feels both familiar and alien now, like a language I used to speak fluently but have somehow forgotten. The space between us, which has always been measured and comfortable, now feels vast and uncrossable. Everything has changed, and nothing has changed. The house is the same, my family is the same, my responsibilities and obligations remain exactly as they were when I left for dinner hours ago. But I am different now in ways that cannot be undone or ignored or filed away with all the other truths I've spent my life avoiding. I have kissed Elias Monroe, and in doing so, I have finally kissed the part of myself I've been holding at arm's length for 2 decades. There is no going back from this revelation, no pretending it didn't happen or that it doesn't mean everything I'm afraid it means. I cannot return to who I was, because I finally remember who I have always been. The confrontation comes 3 days after the kiss, 3 days of moving through my routine like a ghost haunting his own life. Clara finds the reunion invitation tucked between the pages of a book I thought I'd hidden well enough, along with a note from Elias that I'd forgotten was there. The paper is small, torn from his sketchpad, with just one line written in his careful handwriting. This doesn't feel pretend anymore. She's sitting at the kitchen table when I come home from another fabricated late meeting, the invitation and notes spread before her like evidence in a trial I didn't realize had already begun. Her face is calm in a way that's more frightening than anger would be, the kind of composure that comes from finally understanding something you've been trying not to see. "We need to talk," she says, and her voice is steady but hollow, as if she's speaking from somewhere far away. I sit across from her at the table where we've shared thousands of meals, where we've discussed parent-teacher conferences and vacation plans and all the mundane details that make up a shared life. The distance between us now feels measured in decades rather than feet. She holds up the note, and I watch 20 years of careful construction crumble with that simple gesture. "When did this start?" she asks, and I know she's not talking about the reunion or even about Elias specifically. She's asking when I stopped being present in our marriage, when I started living parallel to our life instead of inside it. I could lie. I've become expert at crafting truths that protect everyone's comfort, at finding ways to explain away anything that threatens the stability we've built together. But sitting here with Elias's words between us, with Clara's patient, broken expression, I find I don't have any lies left. "I don't know," I tell her, and it's the most honest thing I've said in our kitchen in longer than I can remember. Maybe it never started. Maybe it just never stopped. She nods as if this confirms something she suspected for years. Her hands are folded in her lap, and she's not looking at me anymore, staring instead at a spot on the wall behind my shoulder. "Have you ever loved me?" she asks, and the question is so direct, so devastating in its simplicity, that I feel something break inside my chest. "Not the way you love him. Have you ever loved me the way a husband should love a wife?" The silence that follows her question fills the kitchen like water, rising until I feel like I might drown in it. I want to tell her yes, of course, to list all the ways I've cared for her over the years, all the moments of tenderness and companionship we've shared. But we both know that caring is not the same as loving, that partnership is not the same as passion, that gratitude is not the same as desire. "I love you," I say finally, but even as the words leave my mouth, we both hear their inadequacy. "You're a good woman, Clara. You deserved better than this. You deserved better than me." She finally looks at me then, and I see tears in her eyes for the first time since our son broke his arm in 3rd grade. But she's not crying for us, I realize. She's crying for all the years we both spent pretending this was enough, for all the conversations we didn't have, for all the truths we were too polite to speak. "I kept thinking it would get better," she says, "that whatever was missing would just appear eventually. That marriage was supposed to feel like work, like something you had to choose every day rather than something that chose you. She tells me about friends who talked about their husbands with light in their eyes, about couples she envied for the way they looked at each other across crowded rooms. She describes lying awake some nights wondering what was wrong with her, that she couldn't inspire that kind of love, couldn't be the kind of woman who made her husband's face change when she walked into a room. Nothing is wrong with you, I tell her, and I mean it more than I've meant anything in years. You're extraordinary. You're kind and intelligent and beautiful, and any man would be lucky to love you the way you deserve to be loved. But not you, she says, and it's not an accusation. It's just a statement of fact, delivered with the exhausted clarity of someone who has finally stopped fighting a truth she can't change. We sit in silence for a long time after that, both of us staring at our hands, at the table, at anything but each other. The kitchen feels different now, charged with honesty that changes everything simply by existing. There's no going back from this conversation, no pretending tomorrow that we haven't finally named what we've both known for years. I'll sleep in the guest room, I say eventually, and she nods without looking up. The guest room bed is narrow and unfamiliar, the sheets crisp with the sterility of a space rarely used. I lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Clara moving through our evening routine in the room next door. The water running as she brushes her teeth, the soft close of dresser drawers as she changes into pajamas, the creak of our bed as she settles in for the night. These are sounds I've heard thousands of times, but tonight they feel like goodbye. I don't sleep. Instead, I lie there taking inventory of everything that will change now that the truth is loose in our house. The children will have to be told, though they're old enough now to handle divorce without the trauma that would have broken them when they were younger. The house will need to be sold, our finances divided, our carefully intertwined lives unwoven thread by thread. But underneath the practical concerns is something else, something that feels like possibility mixed with terror. For the first time in 20 years, I don't know what comes next. The future that seemed so clearly mapped out yesterday has disappeared, leaving me standing at the edge of something vast and undefined. In the morning, Clara is already gone when I wake up, off to her yoga class or book club or one of the dozen activities that structure her days. She's left coffee in the pot and a note on the counter saying she's staying at her sister's for a few days, that we both need space to think about what happens next. I call in sick to work, something I haven't done in years, and drive to the river where Elias and I have walked so many evenings. He's not expecting me, but I need to see him, need to tell him what's happened before I lose the courage that honesty has given me. I find him sitting on the bench where we usually end our walks, sketching in the notebook he carries everywhere. When he sees me approaching, his face changes, surprise giving way to concern as he takes in whatever my expression is telling him. Clara knows, I say without preamble, sitting beside him on the bench. He closes his notebook and turns his body toward mine, giving me his full attention the way he always does. I tell him everything. The confrontation, the note she found, the conversation that finally named all the things we'd been too polite to acknowledge. I described the way Clara looked at me, the weight of her question about whether I've ever really loved her, the relief and terror of finally speaking the truth. Elias listens without interrupting, his dark eyes steady and patient. When I finish, he's quiet for a long time, staring out at the water moving past us. "What do you want, Julian?" he asks finally. "Not what you think you should want or what would make everyone else comfortable. What do you actually want?" It's the same question he asked me weeks ago, the one that started this whole unraveling. But this time, I have an answer. You, I say, and the word feels like stepping off a cliff. I want you. I want to stop pretending that 20 years of marriage have made me into someone I'm not. I want to stop performing happiness and actually try to find it. He reaches for my hand then, his fingers warm and certain as they intertwine with mine. But his expression is serious, almost sad. "You can't want me because I'm an escape from your life," he says gently. "You have to want me because you're ready to build a different life, one that's actually yours. I can't be your rebellion, Julian. I can only be part of whatever comes after you decide who you really are." His words sting because they're true. Part of what draws me to him is the way he represents everything my current life isn't. Authentic, creative, free from the expectations that have shaped every choice I've made since I was 18 years old. But he's right that wanting him and wanting a different life aren't the same thing, even though they feel inseparable right now. I don't know how to do this, I tell him. I don't know how to be the person I think I actually am. Neither do I, he says, squeezing my hand. But I know you can't live for me any more than you can live for Clara or your children or anyone else. You have to decide what your life looks like when you're the one choosing, not just reacting to what everyone else needs from you. We sit there holding hands by the water, both of us staring at the current that keeps moving no matter what we decide. The moment feels suspended, balanced between everything I'm leaving behind and everything I don't yet understand about what comes next. When I finally drive home, the house feels like a museum of someone else's life. The family photos on the mantel, the carefully chosen furniture, the wedding ring I've placed on the kitchen counter next to Clara's note. All of it evidence of choices I made when I was trying to become someone I thought I should be. I don't know yet who I am when I'm not performing for anyone else's comfort. But for the first time in 2 decades, I'm ready to find out. The morning light falls across the kitchen counter in patterns I've never noticed before, cutting through the silence of a house that feels both familiar and foreign. My wedding ring sits beside a folded piece of paper, the letter to Clara that took me 3 hours to write and will take her 30 seconds to read. The words feel inadequate for what they're trying to accomplish, but then again, maybe there are no adequate words for the end of 20 years. I've been standing here for an hour, just breathing. It's something I'm learning to do again. This simple act of drawing air into my lungs without the weight of performance pressing against my chest. My hands shake slightly as I reach for my coffee, but it's not anxiety anymore. It's something closer to anticipation, the nervousness that comes before stepping into a life you've never lived before. The house feels different in Clara's absence. Lighter, somehow, as if the careful politeness that held everything together has finally been released. She texted yesterday to say she's filing papers, that her sister has helped her find a lawyer who specializes in amicable divorces. Even in ending our marriage, she's being kind, considerate, making sure this doesn't become the kind of bitter spectacle that would hurt our children or damage either of us more than we've already damaged ourselves. I walk through rooms that I helped choose, past furniture we picked out together when we still believed we were building something that would last forever. The family photos on the mantel look back at me like evidence from someone else's trial. Happy moments that were real, even if they weren't the whole truth. Our children at various ages, all gap-toothed grins and achievements we celebrated with cake and camera flashes. Clara and I on vacation in places we thought couples should go. Both of us smiling the careful smiles of people who were trying very hard to be happy. None of it was a lie, exactly, but none of it was complete, either. The morning stretches ahead of me, empty in ways that would have terrified me a month ago, but now feel like possibility. I don't have to be anywhere, don't have to perform for anyone, don't have to manage anyone else's expectations of who Julian Carter should be. For the first time in decades, the day belongs entirely to me. I find myself walking toward the park, my feet choosing the path without conscious direction. The air is crisp with early autumn, leaves just beginning to turn colors that will be breathtaking in a few more weeks. There are joggers and dog walkers and mothers pushing strollers, all of them moving through their morning rituals while I move through mine. The bench where Elias usually sketches is occupied by someone else, an elderly man feeding pigeons from a paper bag. I almost turn around, but then I see him sitting on the grass nearby, his back against an oak tree, notebook open in his lap. His dark hair catches the sunlight, and he's completely absorbed in whatever he's drawing, the tip of his tongue visible at the corner of his mouth in concentration. I approach slowly, uncertain suddenly about whether he wants to see me, whether yesterday's conversation at the river was goodbye or hello. We haven't spoken since then, haven't made any promises or declarations about what comes next. He told me I had to decide who I was when I wasn't performing for anyone else, and I've spent the last 24 hours trying to figure out what that means. He looks up as I get closer, his face changing from concentration to something warmer, something that might be relief. He closes the notebook and sets it aside, making space for me on the grass beside him without saying a word. "Julian," he says, and my name in his voice still sounds like coming home, but different now. Less like escape and more like arrival. "I told Clara," I say, settling beside him against the tree. "Everything. About us. About who I am. About all the years I spent pretending to be someone else." He nods, studying my face with those patient eyes that see more than I'm sometimes comfortable with. "How are you?" he asks, and I know he's not making small talk. I think about the question seriously, taking inventory of how I feel sitting here in the morning sunlight with my marriage officially ending and my future completely uncertain. Terrified, I tell him honestly, and relieved, and sad about all the time I wasted being afraid of this moment. He reaches for my hand, the same way he did yesterday by the river, and our fingers intertwine with an ease that still surprises me. We sit like that for a while, not talking, just existing together in a way that doesn't require explanation or justification. "What happens now?" I ask eventually, because the question has been following me since I woke up alone in the guest room. "I don't know," he says, and somehow his honesty is more comforting than false promises would be. "We figure it out as we go, I guess. We see who we are when we're not pretending to be anyone else." A jogger passes us, then a woman walking her dog, and I realize I'm sitting in a public park holding hands with another man, and I don't care who sees us. The fear that used to govern every moment of my life, the constant calculation of what people might think or say or assume, has simply gone. Not because I've become brave, exactly, but because the energy it took to maintain that fear was exhausting, and I finally just ran out. "Do you regret it?" Elias asks. "Any of it? The marriage, the years, the way things happened?" I consider this, watching clouds move across the sky above us. It would be easy to say yes, to frame the last 20 years as a mistake, time wasted on a life that was never really mine. But that would be another kind of lie. "No," I say finally. "I regret the pretending, the way I hurt Clara by not being honest with either of us about who I was. But I don't regret loving my children or building something stable for them to grow up in. I don't even regret the marriage entirely. It taught me things about myself, even if it took me 20 years to understand what those lessons were." Elias smiles, the first real smile I've seen from him since this all began. "That's very wise of you," he says. We sit in comfortable silence after that, both of us watching the world move around us. Parents chasing toddlers, teenagers on skateboards, couples walking hand in hand without thinking about whether anyone is watching or judging or making assumptions about their lives. This is just the beginning, I realize. The hardest parts are still ahead of me. Telling our children, dividing up 20 years of shared possessions, learning how to be single at 43, figuring out what a relationship with Elias might look like when it's not hidden behind lies and careful explanations. But for the first time in my adult life, I'm not afraid of uncertainty. I'm not trying to control the future or manage how others perceive me or construct elaborate systems to avoid uncomfortable truths. I'm just sitting under a tree with someone I care about, holding his hand in broad daylight, breathing air that tastes like freedom. When we finally stand to leave, Elias picks up his notebook and shows me what he's been drawing. It's me, or a version of me I've never seen before. The face is familiar, but the expression is different. Peaceful maybe, or simply present. Not performing for anyone, not trying to be anything other than exactly what he is. "Is that how you see me?" I ask. "It's how you looked sitting there," he says. "Like you were finally home in your own skin." We walk toward our cars slowly, neither of us eager to end this morning that feels like a beginning. When we reach the parking lot, Elias turns to me with an expression I can't quite read. "I'm not going anywhere," he says. "Whatever comes next, however long it takes you to figure out who you are now, I'm not going anywhere. But you have to do the figuring out part yourself." "I know," I tell him, and I mean it. For the first time in my life, I'm ready to meet myself without pretense, to see who I am when I'm not trying to be anyone else. As I drive home, I catch sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me is the same one who left the house this morning, but something has shifted in his eyes. He looks like someone who has finally stopped running from himself, someone who might actually be ready to learn what happiness feels like when you don't have to perform it for anyone else. The cost of this choice is only beginning to unfold, and I know there will be days when the weight of what I've lost will feel heavier than what I've gained. But sitting in my car with morning lights streaming through the windshield, I feel something I haven't felt in 20 years. I feel like myself. And that, finally, is enough.